Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. One of the reasons why I really love the Star Wars universe is that it shows us what can happen when humanity finally transcends their home planet and spreads amongst the stars. Sure, there's still planetary identity. A human can be Corellian or Coruscanti or even Alderaanian. Well, they used to be Alderaanian, now they're just refugees. The point is, while your home planet is culturally significant to your identity, what's more important is the fact that you are actually just a human. I think the reality that there are thousands, if not millions, of sentient species in the galaxy makes human variances in skin color, diet, accents, religious beliefs all kind of seem a bit silly. And so, as humanity became a part of the galactic community, we also became more united as a species. Especially in those earlier days when we didn't know which aliens to wipe out and which ones to befriend and which ones to enslave. But 30,000 years later, during the period of Star Wars that most of us are pretty familiar with, Luke Skywalker doesn't identify as being a white or Caucasian male, but as a failed human Jedi Master and former moisture farmer. Finn doesn't identify as a black male, but as a former human stormtrooper and now Resistance hero. Cassian Andor isn't some Hispanic guy, but a human former Separatist spy, and Rose Tico isn't just some Asian chick. She's a human mechanic and angry revolutionist. It took thousands of years to do, but humanity in the Star Wars galaxy no longer cares about the pigmentation in their skin or defining facial features. Instead, they're worried about more important things. Never again will we hear about how one race is better than another, or generalizations based on race. There is no more racism, there's only speciesism. But what about the idea that humans have privilege in the Star Wars galaxy? Well, first, what the hell does privilege mean? Defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, privilege is a right or immunity granted as a peculiar benefit, advantage, or favor. So it's like when you start a character in a new MMORPG and you join a server where the moderators are really friendly to you and give you extra gold or armor or, XP points, something that not most players get but you get. That is privilege. We hear this term used a lot on the internet and news nowadays, usually in the form of white privilege. It's the idea that white people in America have some preset advantage that no one else has. And in order to better understand what privilege means, let's take a look at this accusation and see just how it breaks down. Can white individuals have privilege? Well, that's pretty easy to answer. Almost anyone, any individual can have privilege, whether they're white or not. Anyone can adopt a fortune or maybe inherit some good genes that makes them smarter and stronger and more athletic. So privilege kind of just happens naturally amongst the populace. Everyone is born with different starting stats and starting points. There's no equality across the board. But what about white people as a collective group in America? Do they have privilege? Well, from a genetic standpoint, white people aren't significantly different from other races by any means. As a matter of fact, mainstream science already considers race a made-up social construct. But what about privileges given to them by society? Well, what kind of organization has enough control over society to actually institutionalize privilege? That would be the government and the various institutions that control everything we do here in America. They're kind of like the moderators of the server. So back in the day when slavery was legal and there was segregation and the Jim Crow laws, white people as a race did have privilege thanks to institutions like the government. But today in 2019, it's pretty hard to find actual examples of institutionalized racism, especially at the federal level. Sure, there might be legislation that disproportionately affects certain demographics more than others, but to prove that the intent there is to discriminate against a certain race is relatively hard to do. We'd have to rely on just the words themselves, and as far as I know, there are no laws in America that discriminate against a specific race in writing. But there is another layer of privilege that white people in this country can enjoy that naturally occurs because the population is predominantly white and the country is founded by mostly white people. Therefore, everything in our society, from our entertainment to our culture, skews in a certain way. For those of you who have visited other countries, you'll notice that this is a common occurrence in almost every country in the world, especially ones with very homogeneous population. It's like me going to China and observing that, wow, there are a lot of Chinese people here and stuff made for Chinese people. Of course, China lacks that wonderful diversity we have in the States, and because being American is about our beliefs in the founding principles of this country and not our racial identity, it would be ideal that everything in our society perfectly reflects the demographics of our country. So if there are 5% Asians in America, which is actually a very diverse demographic all by itself, there are South Asians, Southeast Asians, East Asians, Super Saiyan Asians, and so on. Then 5% of all actors on TV and movies should be Asian as well. So as an Asian, I can see other people who look like me on TV, which actually starts getting a bit convoluted again, because what kind of Asians are we talking about, right? South Asians, Southeast Asians. This is why things get super complicated when people focus just on their race, rather than better individual identifiers like what your interests are, what your profession is, or even your political views. And that's because we can't control our race. We are born into it, and therefore we should not judge others or ourselves by it. Which is why America's fascination on race is not only backwards, but it also really prevents any kind of progress from being made. And that's because in the Star Wars universe, once you start seeing other sentient races, the minute differences in pigmentation and facial features that humans have seem quite trivial. Because again, scientifically speaking, there is no such thing as race. It is a complete social construct. And with more and more interracial couples making babies, people who cling onto their race as their main identity will be looked at in the future as backwards and primitive people. In a very advanced galactic-wide society like Star Wars, a human being who's constantly obsessed with race and talking about it would be seen as a weird individual. But of course, with every advance in civilization comes new problems and a lot of old ones resurfacing. Which is why we'll return to the question about whether humanity as a group in Star Wars has privilege. From what we can tell in Legends, humans first arrived on the scene somewhere around 200,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. They lived on a planet known as Norton, which eventually turned into Coruscant. Somewhere around 30,000 years ago before the Battle of Yavin, the first human sleeper ships started venturing to nearby systems. First in the core systems and then eventually to the Outer Rim, which is why several systems in the galaxy have humans as their native populations. It's not that they evolved there, they just happened to be the first people to colonize or settle there. While other species also colonize other worlds and can be found on multiple systems, it seems like humans did this more than any other species. And if you look at humans on a galactic scale, we kind of fit in the middle of everything. We physically are average, we have average intelligence, we have average lifespan, and so on. It's almost like we're a blank genetic template. We're like the default character class. It's even hypothesized that near-human species like the Twi'leks, Chiss, Pantorans, and many other alien species are evolutionary offshoots of humans. So through sheer numbers, humans definitely have privilege in the galaxy. You're more likely to find a cantina or a restaurant that serves human food. You're more likely to find a hotel or public transportation with seats and beds that fit a human ergonomically. The very air and temperature inside of buildings and space stations will be catered towards a human's needs. Entertainment, whether it's a holodrama or a jizz band, will be created for human consumption. So life is just better as a human. Just look at what Watambor species, the Skakoan, have to deal with. They can't breathe oxygen and require full pressure suits to just walk around. It's absolutely terrible. Then there are the Mon Calamari, an ocean-going species that needs high humidity to avoid skin damage and discomfort. Humans are also much more likely to be put into positions of leadership and power, whether it be the numerous chancellors of the Republic or leaders and heroes of the rebellion. For whatever reason, it's humans who have the most impact on the galaxy and determine the future of the galaxy. And if you look at it, the only organization that didn't usually have human leadership was the Jedi, and things didn't really turn out great for them. But what about institutionalized privilege for humanity in the Star Wars galaxy? Did it exist? Well, according to the Galactic Republic Constitution, all sentient beings were considered equal. It also guaranteed basic freedoms and rights for all sentient beings and so on. But how much control the central government had over the galaxy and how good it was at enforcing the Constitution is a whole nother subject. Generally speaking, the Republic did a terrible job. There were regional and planetary governments that not only discriminated certain species in favor of others, there were even systems that still had slavery, which was clearly illegal. But with the rise of the Galactic Empire and the fall of the Republic, things gradually got worse for non-humans. The Emperor was a human, a wrinkly scrotum-like human, but still one of us, and overnight the Emperor created major changes in the galaxy, first by strengthening the federal government at the expense of planetary governments, and at the same time increased the size of the military-industrial system at the expense of the galactic economy. The Galactic Empire military started swallowing up resources and gradually became the largest employer in the galaxy, and also consequently one of the few pathways to economic stability and success for an individual. The problem was that military service was mainly limited to just human beings. There were many reasons why. One, it made standardization easier. Also, selecting one species for your military meant less cultural differences and less internal problems. Perhaps the most important reason was the Galactic Empire was a human-centric government. Most of the governing and ruling positions within the Empire were taken by humans, even in sectors with mainly non-human populaces. There were non-humans, of course, in higher positions, but they were mainly advisors, and also near-human as well. The Galactic Empire also supported something known as human high culture, establishing that humans were inherently superior to other species. It should also be noted that most core world planets were heavily populated with humans. The chief tenet of human high culture was a bit extreme perhaps. It stated that humans were the only true intelligent and productive members of any society and cited humanity's contribution in creating and forming the Old Republic. The Galactic Empire went as far as to repeal the right of sentience in the Galactic Constitution. It replaced that with new laws that classified non-humans as second-class citizens, which opened the way for slavery. There were also even more draconian laws that basically censored non-human art and limited art to just human-made. I mean, what's the point in living in a galaxy full of aliens if you can't enjoy all the crazy art and creations they make? They say Palpatine first developed his hatred for non-humans during his childhood on Naboo, where the local humans were constantly at odds with the Gungans, who lived in the swamps. Although it is debatable whether he is in fact a speciesist, after all, his two top allies, Slymore and Masamita, were aliens, and his mentor, who he did kill, was immune. His first apprentice was also Zabrak, and when he did kill or genocide people, Palpatine equally spread death amongst humans and non-humans. But what is clear is that humans definitely had privilege during his time in office. Well, that's my opinion on the matter, but I'd love to hear what you think about human privilege in the Star Wars galaxy. And also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.